Look, every time, or I should say last time we had Arnold Bennett on, Montreal Housing Advocate, running through some of the things you should know as a tenant, we get a lot of reaction. We get text messages, people calling up. How do I get a hold of them? Where do I go online? I have a problem. So there's another one of those situations today. This is actually kind of interesting where there is a list now created. It's a story in today's Journal de Montréal of the top 10 tactics that landlords may use to drive their tenants, I guess, crazy enough to eventually leave or get out. So we thought we'd run some of these by Arnold Bennett. And Arnold, I understand you've heard virtually of every single one of these and more than one occasion.
Oh, yeah, going back years.
Okay, let me start with the top of the list here. Number one, the opportune accident, where apparently some aspiring renovators have had some bad luck carrying out some work. Oops, I damaged a pipe and you're going to have to leave. What about that?
I've seen it. It's not as frequent as it seems to imply in the article, but certainly it's out there.
What do you do in a situation like that? Do you have to prove that's not the case?
Well, basically, we go on the principle here of obligation of result. Okay? So a landlord's supposed to provide a place that's in fit condition, and there are many cases where there are, floods or other things which may or may not have been caused by another tenant or by the landlord, deliberately, not deliberately, whatever. But the tenant's got the right to have their place fit to live in, and if they have to evacuate, they can demand that the landlord do the work within a reasonable time, that the landlord cover the costs of their temporary relocation. They can go to the tribunal if necessary and get an order. They can claim a rent reduction. In some cases, they can claim damages. So there's all kinds of possibilities.
Okay. Number two on the list, complicate the payment of rent. So your landlord suddenly requires payment through an online platform if you live in that building. The problem, of course, is some elderly, some without smartphones or computers are kind of left in the dark. What happens then?
This is a new problem. I've only noticed it in about the last couple of years. The tenant, in principle, has the right to demand that the landlord come to the house, to the apartment to collect the rent. That's what is generally assumed unless it says something different in the lease. So if the landlord tries to get you to accept a mode of payment that you're not comfortable with, that's a change of conditions of the lease, and you should refuse it, just like you would refuse a rent increase, and then the tribunal will address the issue. Okay? If you do accept the mode of payment dictated by the landlord, you're stuck with it. Now, is it a good idea for people to do e-transfer of rent rather than having to play around getting the landlord a check or mailing rent or all the other ways things can get lost? Yeah, it's better. But, if you can't do it, you can't do it.
And however you were doing it, that was the agreed upon way you would do it. That stays the case because that's what you signed in your lease.
Exactly.
Okay.
And as I said, if it's not stipulated in the lease, then there's the principle in law is the landlord's supposed to come get the rent.
Okay.
Which isn't convenient for either of you, so better that there should be an agreed-upon mode of payments.
Okay. Number three, tell several tenants housing is being recovered for the same family member. So, yes, the idea that you own the building or whatever, you can tell someone, I want my son, my daughter, whatever, to move in, but then you do this over and over again.
That is not too common. A lot of bad faith repossessions, but trying to claim, that you've got your father wants 20 different places. I saw that once many, many years ago. I wrote a column about it. And, of course, it got tossed out of court, and it's such a stupid approach because inevitably somebody's going to find out and the landlord's going to get whacked down by the court. That's why you don't see it.
But to go back to what you said to start, you've seen, though, what you call bad faith repossessions. So that's someone claiming and even one unit, and it turns out not to be the case.
Well, yeah, and where you have a situation where the landlord says, well, I want the unit, and then he doesn't move in the person or he puts the building up for sale, then the tenant can sue for damages. If the tenant's lucky, they can prove bad faith before the repossession. When the case goes to court, and the judge will refuse the repossession. I've seen that happen too. But obviously, the grayer the area, the more the court will tilt to allowing the landlord to do the repossession and leaving it open for the tenant to sue afterwards.
So in the case of someone doing this to landlord to a tenant, Where do you have what do you use as proof to prove that, in fact, it is a family member moving in and that's what the landlord can do by law? How would you even know?
What, you mean that he didn't move in, that family member?
Yeah.
Neighbors might watch out for the situation.
Mm-hmm.
In extreme cases, detective work might be required.
Okay.
If a building is put up for sale, that's an obvious sign. It goes on the real estate listings. There's all kinds of ways.
Okay, let me move on. I want to cover as many as we can before we run out of time. Screaming out asbestos. So we know that more than half of the city's buildings contain asbestos. It's obviously dangerous if it doesn't get removed. What are landlords doing in these cases?
Haven't seen that much. I've seen cases where there actually is asbestos. When they're doing a renovation, it opens it up, and then you've got a hazard. Okay, but like it said in the article, if you leave it alone, it's not going to bother anybody.
Okay, so that's not necessarily an excuse that can be used.
Well, if there's asbestos, that gets released in the building, it's
sure.
a contaminant and it's dangerous, and the city might order a temporary evacuation or something.
Okay. Number 5, remove the lock.
That happens a lot, or not so much remove the lock, more like the lock gets broken and they don't bother to replace it, and then you have your street people and your criminal elements and God knows what hanging around in the front hall and scaring everybody.
Okay, and in a case like that, ultimately in all these cases, Arnold, as you described them, you have an option as a tenant to go ahead and go to the board and let them know this is happening, right?
Yeah, not only the board. I mean, they play around with the safety of the building like that. There's city bylaws requiring that they keep the door, that they have a functioning lock on the door, and you can call the city inspectors on that.
Another one that they point out today, the owner of an apartment building, this one happens to be near the Jean Talon Market, the story says, seems to spend his life monitoring his tenants with dozens of security cameras as a form of intimidation. What do you do in a case like that?
It's invasion of privacy. You could possibly go to start with a registered letter and then go to the tribunal, ask for an order to stop the invasion of privacy. That article gives a lot of examples of ways he's playing Big Brother and snooping around on everything they do. That's kind of extreme. There are people who behave like that, but it's not a systematic thing.
Okay. This one is particularly bothersome and hard to believe people actually do this. A landlord who targets refugees and makes them sign what look like attractive leases, but for housing that's already occupied, so he gets to pocket the first month's rent.
Yeah, there's a lot of fraud like that. I haven't seen that many cases of it, but it is out there.
Again, you find yourself in a situation like that. This is particularly difficult. You're a refugee here. You think you've rented a decent place, find out it's not, and you're kind of stuck at that point. I don't think a lot of people even know what their option would be here. Okay,
well, first of all, any money they paid they can get back. If there was a signed lease through the rental board, if there's no lease and just money the guy extracted from them illegally, small claims court is another option.
Okay.
And what they mentioned in the article was not only the person who got scammed coming to a place where there's already a tenant, but that the tenants who there get scared into leaving because somebody shows up showing that they've got a lease.
Right.
I don't generally see people, I'm sure it happens, but I don't generally see people move out just because some guy comes to the door and tells them to.
Okay, last one. Intimidating guy who knocks on a tenant's door to tell them they have to leave, to make them sign papers agreeing to do so. He pretends perhaps to be a lawyer. What happens there?
Not so much pretending to be a lawyer, but plenty of banging on the door and intimidating people into signing to leave. Happens to old people a lot.
And again, your first reaction or first thing you should do if you find yourself in that situation?
Well, problem is once you sign something, it becomes very difficult to overturn. However, if somebody is a senior citizen, this would be considered a violation of Article 48 of the Quebec Charter of Rights, exploitation of a senior citizen. Somebody could go to the tribunal to have the agreement overturned on the grounds of Article 48.
Okay.
Uphill battle, but it's possible.
For anybody who wants to get, I asked you that last time as well, just as a website, someplace to go as a resource?
Better to call the hotline, 514-488-0412.
Say it one more time.
514-488-0412. 0412.
That is the housing hotline. Arnold, as always, appreciate it. Thanks so much.